Hello, a very warm welcome to you all to the 5th Annual Sales Compensation Summit. My name is Amanda and I host all the events for eReward, and I'm speaking to you now from sunny Sussex. Our expert David Cichelli will be presenting from California, and we've got delegates from Canada, all over Europe, the Middle East, Colombia and Russia. So welcome to you all. And this event has actually been 2 years in planning now, thanks to COVID, and we couldn't have run it today without our amazing sponsors, Varicent, Optimisation and BCom. They're all industry experts who have worked with many companies like yours and have a whole wealth of experience to pass on to you. So chat to them if you get the chance. I was speaking the other day to Diane Auld. Some of you probably know her. She's a very senior and respected professional in the pay and compensation world. And we were talking about this event. And she said to me that she bases all of her sales compensation work and projects on the work of David Cichelli, all his ideas, his theories, his formulas. She turns to David time and time again. So I'm going to hand you over to David now. We've all got an awful lot to learn from him. David Cichelli from the Alexandra Group.
Thank you, Amanda, and welcome all of you to the Sales Compensation Summit. And as Amanda pointed out, we could have said this was a European summit, but in fact, it's a worldwide summit from people from all over the world. And we're delighted that you're here. First of all, thank you, Amanda and Paul Thompson at eReward. We're co-hosting this, the Alexandra Group, with eReward. It's a great subject, and I want to pause a minute and just chat a little bit about your professional responsibilities. So sales compensation is one of those mission-critical programs that affects the fortunes of your company, in terms of growing the business and selling the right products, but it also affects the lives of thousands of people all across the globe as they work in sales roles and they're performing. So your work is consequential. It has impact on your company and it has impact on individual people. So it's a noble endeavor, and it is something that is of high value. And to me, it's kind of a pretty interesting subject. So let me introduce the Alexandra Group. The Alexandra Group is co-hosting the event with eReward, and we're revenue growth consultants. We're consultants to sales organizations, and they are constantly fussing and struggling with how to design their go-to-market strategy, how to deploy their resources, hiring the right types of people and training them, and then how to manage their performance. And there are many performance management programs, not just sales compensation, that make sales organizations successful. But the topic today is one of those, and that's, of course, sales compensation. And I've had the pleasure to work on this subject for many, many decades, and I'm always learning something about it. And so as the presenters present today, I always take notes. It always reveals something to me that I hadn't considered. And part of your responsibilities and your accountability, of course, is your own professional development. And many of us frequently are just looking for immediate answers on certain questions, and certainly we can handle those, and please enter those into the comments section. But your professional development and your learning journey is, this is part of it, and there is other ways that you can experience and grow in your career and also contribute to your company. So today I have a really set of great sessions for you. Thankfully, I am looking forward to some of the presenters that we're going to have. I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about why sales compensation is always changing, and I will come back to that. We'll get that session set up. But we also have sessions from our sponsors, and let me talk a little bit about our sponsors. So we have Varicent, BCom, and Optimisation. And like you, I'm a student of the subject, so I always listen pretty carefully to how these organizations present their products. We take a look at Varicent and BCom. They actually have software solutions to help to do the administration. And Optimisation is kind of the organization, if you're trying to figure out how to buy the right product and install it, they give you, provide those types of resources too. And by the way, they have brought with them some really great gifts. So make sure you go to their booths in the expo hall, and there's some nice giveaways. I think there's some Amazon gift cards, which you can use to purchase my book on Amazon. Okay, no, stop, David. and also some gifts. I think there's a speaker, Sonos speakers available by Open Symmetry. So I'm encouraging you to, listen to what they have to say. I'm always curious about where the product space is going and things like that. So in addition to that, we have another presentation today, which we'll be doing a case study. Jeremy Wilson of Keyloop and Jamie Riley of the Alexander Group. We're going to actually do a real case that in terms of their design effort and so what they went through. And so that will be very, very revealing. So of course, we'll hear Verisent present today, and they're going to do a nice case study with SCC. And BCom will give us a little bit of insight into the people dimension about managing sales compensation. So with that, I just again, I want to welcome you to our program, and it's always a great set of subject to talk about. And I compliment you for investing this time and being part of this learning exercise and conference. So with that, let's get started with my session. And my session, which we'll start off with, is going to cover a question like, and let me start with the answer. Okay, the answer is this: why does sales compensation change all the time? Now, of course, many of us might have works councils, which we're kind of limited about the types of changes we need to make, but there's always pressure to change the compensation program. And you might say, well, why is that? If I take a look at other human capital reward programs or human reward programs, and the benefit programs get sort of stationary. Why is the sales department always fussing with their compensation program? Can't they seem to get it right? And what I'm going to suggest to you is that it's supposed to change. So every year I conduct a survey, and I've been doing this for 20 years, and I ask the question, did you change your sales compensation program? And the answer is 92% of all companies change their sales compensation program. And that has been the number, 89, 91, 92, has been the same number for ever since I've been doing this survey for 20 years. I do it every December. I ask the question, did you change your comp program for the next year? And the answer is, yes, we did. And so if you start to think about it, you say, well, if they're always changing, there must be an underlying reason why they're making those changes. And what I'm going to suggest to you is a theorem, sort of and it's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. It's a theorem that suggests, there's an underlying pattern that causes companies to change their sales compensation program. What is the variable that's causing that to happen? And the punchline or the conclusion of this presentation is that your growth rate as a company is changing the role of the sales organization. And so therefore, always you need to be changing your compensation program unless you're stationary. You don't have any new products, you don't have any new go-to-market strategies, you don't have any new competitors. If none of those things are true, then probably your compensation program could not, remain constant from year to year. Now, some folks will say, well, isn't that sort of disruptive? And I want to give you one piece of advice about this. So we shouldn't be making changes willy-nilly. We call it whale watching. You ever go on a whale watching boat? You run from one side of the boat to the other. There's the whale, and they run to that side of the boat, vice versa. So no, we don't want to be making changes willy-nilly. We want to be making small changes on an annual basis so that the sales organization is in alignment with the business objectives of the organization, and that their support programs, one of which is sales compensation, is supporting that effort. And so most of the changes that take place are actually small changes. Only a few companies, less than 10%, do a major redesign, of their compensation programs. So 90% change, but about 10% do a major redesign. It means the thing got completely out of line, and we need to get in there and redo the whole thing from top to bottom. So small changes are really appropriate. So here's the piece of advice that I have for you. Commit to the money, not to the mechanics. And so what that really means is, as I communicate to my sales organization, whether I'm in North America or in Europe or anywhere throughout the world is that we have a commitment to an earning opportunity. However, on an annual basis, we're going to take a look at what our strategy and may change the measures or the payout formulas to help you reach that monies that we have set aside for our incentive program. Commit to the money, not to the mechanics. So every year we can say to our organization, our sales teams, we're here to update the program for next year. The incentive opportunities are the same, if not increased. And this year we're going to be focusing on organic growth, or we're going to be focusing on profitability, or we're going to be focusing on new accounts, and whatever it might be. And remember, sales compensation plans are written by job. Each job has its own pay program. Okay, so the question is, why does sales compensation change? And the answer is your growth rate is changing the nature of what you're doing and how you're going to market. And therefore, the compensation program needs to be looked at on an annual basis so that it is remaining contemporary with where your business is going. Okay, so let's take a look and see how David thinks about this. And again, this is my experiential knowledge. You may have a different take on this, and really it would be fine for you to say, I don't know if I totally agree with that, but the takeaway is movement. It's kind of like plate tectonic theory. That's why we have earthquakes and volcanoes, is there's an underlying set of movement taking place. And that movement, in my opinion, I'm theorizing, is the growth rate. Okay, so the objective is drive revenue growth through strategic sales compensation design. The agenda is I'm going to talk about growth phases, I'm going to talk about strategy, I'm going to talk about sales motions. The actual behavior of selling actually changes in these different phases. And then it actually changes the nature of the jobs and therefore the metrics. And then I have some sample formulas I'm going to share with you that occur in each growth phase. Now, they're not recommended designs, but they're showing you how the evolution of your growth and your organization is occurring, and therefore the pay program is needs to be kept up with it. Okay. All right. So this is a classic structure about how revenue organizations manage themselves. Okay. So if you take a look at this, we call it the revenue growth model. And you can see if you were the chief revenue officer of your company, you'd have to be worried about all these things. You're the revenue leader. That's that bar across the top. But you would have to be interested and understand and know what markets are we going to? What are we saying to them? Number three, how are we going to interact with those customers? We have a great presentation tomorrow from Matt Greenstein talking about the impact of digital selling behaviors and how that's changing the nature of the jobs. And then we have structure. And those are things like, what are our channels? What are our jobs? How many people do we have? Sizing and deployment. And then under management, who the heck are we going to hire? And then how are we going to measure them? And then finally, is sales compensation and the reward systems or the performance management programs, one of which is the compensation program. And that then sits on top of our revenue operations. And remember, revenue operations is our municipal services. They are the ones that frequently, and many of you might be in revenue operations, are the ones that will frequently have to reconcile and manage these programs, all of these programs. So that gives you a picture about, if you're a chief revenue officer, sales comp is important, but it's at the end of a series of decisions. And so if anything should change up before pillar 9, 1 through 8, it could in fact impact the sales organization. And therefore it may, not necessarily always, it may impact the sales compensation program. So you understand, product lifecycle theory and industry lifecycle theory. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break growth into 4 phases. I'm going to call a startup, scaling growth, volume growth, and then reevaluation and optimization. And in this chart, what this is basically saying is what you're trying to do in phase 1, startup, is you're just trying to get revenue. Try to get as much revenue as you can to lower the unit cost to produce the profit line that appears at the end of that phase. And then as you move into volume growth, whatever was working in phase 1 startup, you just make it bigger. Okay, we have 10 sales reps. No, well, you need 20. If we have 20, we need 40. And so whatever was successful in that early stage of growth, we basically scale up the sales organization. And the sales organization is focused on revenue growth. However, at certain point in time, the reevaluation phase, things start to slow down. And you might go, well, why is that occurring? I'll comment on that in a second. But all of a sudden, things are not growing like they used to grow. We're growing at less than 10%. So there's a whole bunch of issues about buying companies. Excuse me. Let me cough there a second. And deciding where we're going to go as a business. And so we go through this reevaluation phase. And then eventually we get into optimization. Only certain business is good business. Okay, so that's a pattern that we're suggesting. So what you should visualize is what's happening to my sales department. And of course, why do we have problems in phase 3, the reevaluation phase? Well, we have competition, we have saturation, we have disruption, we have displacement, we have people just don't need our things anymore. The number one reason is saturation. Generally, at a certain point, you're saturating the market with product and you're not growing at greater than 10%. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of pricing pressure, and consequently, we often look to the sales compensation program at that stage to help reconcile that pricing issue. So you can see what's occurring over these different phases: grow really fast, keep customers, launch new products. That's a phase 2 sort of thing. Control pricing, reduce costs. You know, it's a dark period. The reevaluation phase is sort of a dark period for sales organizations. This is when finance people start coming to the national sales rallies and stuff like that. And there's a question about why are we paying so much for salespeople? And there's a whole bunch of pressure on pricing and on costs. And then eventually, by the time you get to the optimization phase, a leader will stand up and say, you know what, not all business is good business. Only some business is good business, and we need to refocus on where that business is. Again, our revenue organization needs to follow along and deploy jobs that match that. So that's the underlying theorem, that the growth phases are actually changing the nature of the revenue organization. And you can actually see here the different things that would occur. Let me read the dark band. So in the growth phase startup, we're trying to discover how do we sell this stuff? Who's going to buy it? What do we say to them? And then in the second phase, volume growth, execution excellence is where we're really saying, hey, we're really getting good at this. Let's really start onboarding people, bringing them up to speed. We'll get more people in the field. We'll get more territories. We'll open up different countries. And then the reevaluation phase, the questions about, and I always, I'll get this phone call. They'll say, David, what is the cost of selling? And I know right away whenever a company calls me, they're growing at less than 10%. And somebody has said, is the sales organization costing us too much money? And so there's an absolute drive for productivity improvement and driving. And a lot of, by the way, a lot of sales effectiveness products are purchased at this time. Maybe consulting, maybe training, maybe enablement, a whole bunch of a variety of things, trying to improve the productivity of the sales organization. And then at between 3 and 4, somebody starts to say, you know, we need to think differently about revenue segments and how we go to market. And consequently, there's maybe even a redesign of the revenue organization, the sales organization, around buyer populations, okay? And you can just see, again, I'm not trying to read all these words so you can kind of scan them, but I'm giving you the sense that there is movement. There is continual movement and growth of a revenue organization. So you can see discovery, scaling, execution, enablement, rationalization, that's the cost control activities. Then adding value, solution selling, all in phase 4. A couple quick questions. So David, are these distinct periods? No, they're not. They overlap each other. Well, so what happens? Do we just sail off at the end and into oblivion? No, it's actually like a globe. It's a circle. You're circling around continually. And if you said, well, we have some businesses that are startup and some businesses that are flat and some businesses that are growing, well, then you're by definition in phase 4. And consequently, what's very interesting is the pay systems, the sales compensation pay systems, differ by phase of growth, okay? So you can see we would be making changes. Maybe we start off with geographic territories, and then in the second phase, we stratify big accounts, small accounts. And then in the reevaluation phase, we're adding new products. So we might have product overlay specialists and market overlay specialists. And then maybe even new channels are considered by the time you get to phase 4. Again, you know, we're not trying to justify some observations and go test all these theories, but I'm just telling you movement. So there's movement taking place, and this is generally what the pattern is. So the next question is, so what does that mean for a sales organization? Well, a sales organization is a messenger, okay? They're a messenger, and they have different categories of what they message to customers. So there's 3 I'm going to suggest to you. And by the way, that's not unique. They could be, customers could be getting one set of messages, and a different population of customers get a different set of messages. So if I take a look at, and why I'm bringing this up is because as these messages get assigned to sales resources, this message charter, it changes. Obviously, the job is changing, and consequently, the messaging is changing too. So 3 types of selling behaviors. And by the way, if you read all the books on sales training and sales improvement and sales enablement, you can generally find all those books on this page, okay? So there's a certain thing about sales fulfillment. Well, when do you do sales fulfillment selling? When the customer knows you. So you have a good relationship, you make sure their needs are being met. It's a very service-oriented job. Think real quickly, what type of pay system do you think those types of sellers have? Generally a pretty high base salary and a relatively small incentive. What about advocacy selling? Now, this is when you have a really great idea and you want to go tell everybody and convince them they should buy it. That's called advocacy selling. And that means I got to provide purchase justification, I got to offer assurance, I got to offer decision guidance. And that's our classic, you know, get out and go sell the product. That particular type of job, if it's got that message responsibility, is going to have a lot of pay at risk. So that might be our 60-40 job, 60% in base salary, 40% in target incentive. And that would have a much higher upside earning opportunity. And then the third type of messaging is what's called sales innovations. And these are what's called disruptive selling, where the customer says, I think we need this. And the salesperson says, you know, I don't know if you do. Maybe what we need to do is assess what you're currently doing and then figure out a unique solution that will match your circumstances. Now, then I would ask the question again, how aggressive is the pay program for sales innovation? Not that aggressive. Might be an 80-20 or 70-30 or 85-15. These are usually very high-level salespeople, and they're really acting as consultants to their clients, to their customers. So what's the point, David? Well, as we go through the different phases of growth, obviously we're going to need different types of sales motions. So our discovery phase, we're doing a lot of that in the startup phase. Then we have the great advocacy phase, that's in the volume growth. And then there's just a lot of fulfillment selling. In fact, many of the customers would prefer to purchase via the web. They don't even want to talk to a salesperson. So maybe we do some rationalization and we move some customers to web purchases. And then when we are really thinking about adding value and increasing our profitability, this voice about innovation is sometimes called solution selling or challenging selling or custom selling or creating unique value propositions for customers. So as the organization migrates through these phases, so is the sort of sales messaging that we're doing, and the jobs are changing. Now that will all eventually, some of that will then trickle down into, okay, so what's the right compensation program we should have? And that's what we're going to take a look at. And again, I'm not prescribing, I'm not saying your destiny is on this page, and I'm not suggesting that all companies have to follow this pattern. They don't. But what I'm really saying is kind of explains where volcanoes and earthquakes come from. There's an underlying movement, of the magna at the center of the world, and that's the growth rate. So I'm trying to assure you, don't be surprised when your stakeholders, your revenue team leaders come to you and say, we need to change the comp program. That's a good thing. In fact, it should be making small changes every year. Amanda mentioned I'm in California. So consider a minute this question. How many earthquakes does California have each year? You have a guess? 12,000. 12,000 earthquakes every year. And you can Google it. Wow, that sounds pretty dangerous, David. No, it's a lot of small movement. California is going up to Canada on its way to Alaska, okay, and maybe over the polar, and millions and millions of years. We only feel maybe an earthquake every 2 to 4 years, okay? So we don't feel them, but they're constantly in movement, and that's what I'm suggesting to you. Your organization is in constant movement, so you have you have to embrace the fact that there's going to be changes, and they need to take place on an annual basis. Okay, now, all right, so give me some practical applications of this, David. Okay, well, so maybe you started out with territory reps. You know, you divide up the country into postal codes or into cities, and you assign the salespeople, go get them. Well, then eventually you go, wait a minute, we got big customers, we got small customers, we got, you know, maybe some telesales customers. And then during the revaluation phase, we might even pick up strategic account managers and product overlay specialists, pre-sale support people, SEs, for example, channel management people. And then even in the optimization phase, we might find these jobs, global account manager, vertical market seller. Okay, so how many compensation programs do you need? How many plans? One for each job. Now, tomorrow I have a session. I'll show you how you can have one set of principles, but yet have unique designs for each job. So some folks might say, no, we have our corporate plan. Okay, that's great, but that's not a sales compensation program. So a sales compensation program is going to have a plan that shares a set of principles with all of the other plans that you design, the same set of underlying principles, which I'll share with you tomorrow. But the actual design itself, its performance measures will be unique to each job. And that's a good thing. Okay. So you can see how the measures change during these phases. Normally in the early phases, we're focusing on production. Then in the volume growth phase, we're starting to do some strategic measures. And then the yield measures in phase 3, you know, things like profit, price realization. So if somebody comes up to me at a conference and says, don't you think salespeople should be measured on profitability? I will ask the question, so is it, are you growing at less than 10%? Yeah. We're like, our growth is terrible, and these sales reps are discounting or, you know, giving away services. Yeah, you're going to start to pick up those measures to fortify your margins, because you can't simply keep growing by discounting. And then you can see in the optimization phase, you might have jobs that are actually creating prime vendor relationships, long-term contracts, maybe even outsourcing solutions. So David, are you saying we no longer do territories anymore, territory managers, and no longer just on revenue? No. You may leave in place your territory rep job, which is kind of go out and find new customers for us. So are you suggesting then, David, that I will have different measures and different types of jobs? Yes, you will. And so when you do your sales compensation design work, it always start with, tell me about this job. So if somebody hands me a compensation program and says, so what do you think about this design, David? I will look at it and I will say, before I look at the plan, tell me what the job is doing. And then once I hear what the job is doing, and I'll look at the plan and says, does this plan match that job? By the way, when we interview sales reps, and I highly recommend you do it, when we interview sales reps, we, for when we're doing redesign work, you know, frequently the whole thing needs to be redone from top to bottom. I will go out and I will sit with the sales rep and I'll say, hi, we're here to talk about sales compensation. But the first question is, what are they asking you to do? And they'll start to describe, well, I have these accounts and I'm responsible for growing revenue. And then we have these contests, which I'm supposed to push these new products. And then I also have this pricing challenge that they give me. And then I say, now, does the sales compensation program match what you're being asked to do? And if they go, oh, I hate that comp program. Yeah, but it does match. Okay, I mean, that's exactly what they're asking me to do. So that's really, if you're a designer, a sales compensation plan designer, you want to make sure that what that job is, how that job is structured, the pay program is matching that job's charter. I would have to, though, confess to you that by the time you get to phase 3, a lot of the sales jobs are broken. They're corrupted with tasks they shouldn't be doing. They're blended. They're doing dissimilar things and trying to get new accounts and keep existing accounts and launch new products. If you're an account manager, that's really a problematic when you have so many dissimilar activities. So a lot of jobs start to actually come under duress. And one of the things I would recommend to you as a compensation designer is to be a job designer too. And that is to pressure test the jobs to make sure the sales reps have enough time available to sell. And so that really is sort of, those two things go hand in hand, job design and sales compensation plans. And if a plan is not working, and the way you know it's not working is that like very few people are reaching quota, that means something is wrong. Something in the quota system, something in the pay system is not functioning right, or you're not paying out your target incentive budget. Most of the time, we either have them pointed at the wrong customers and the wrong populations, or we have a job design issue. And so a job design issue needs to be brought onto the table. So we have this job, I want you to get new accounts and I want you to handle your existing accounts. Well, many companies will split that job into what's called a hunter, go get me new accounts, and a farmer, take care of these existing accounts. And so that job gets split into a business development job, go get new customers, very aggressive incentive program. And then taking care of existing customers is your account manager plan, not as aggressive incentive program. So what have I said so far? So sales compensation changes every year. Got it, David. Okay, why? Okay, because you're changing. Your revenue growth is changing. The stages that you're going through is changing. The types of messaging that you're saying to customers is changing. And as a result of that, the jobs need to be made aligned with the mission, and then the pay system is then matched up against those jobs. Okay, so I kind of assure you that it's, having presented this to many clients. I had one client, a very large a company worldwide, headquartered in Germany, and the head of the global revenue organization said, "You have a keen understanding about who we are and where we're at." And I have to apologize. I really didn't know that much about them. The charts haven't really changed in, X number of years. So in other words, this resonates with revenue leaders. They go, oh, so it's not that there's a right and a wrong answer. There's an appropriate or inappropriate answer. And the appropriateness is defined by your growth rate. So that growth rate is changing the charter of the sales organization. The jobs themselves need to be made contemporary and kept contemporary with their mission, and then the pay system aligned to that. So that means, guess what? Every year, you need to relook at all the pay programs to see if anything has changed. So I highly recommend that you don't wait for the next earthquake to occur. You want a lot of little earthquakes. So every year, so he says, no, we're fine. There's no need to change it. You'll upset the sales force. No, and your answer is nope. Before the fiscal year, 3 months out, we're going to take a look and review the current pay program, how it's paying out. We're going to look at the jobs. We're going to do this all together. And we'll see if there's any small changes that we need to make in terms of the measures. By the way, the most common measure, I do ask that question. What's the most common thing that you do on an annual basis in terms of changes? The performance measures. So the jobs can get misaligned. It usually takes multiple years to do that. But performance measures are more frothy, more dynamic, and they can change pretty quickly. And as a result of that, on an annual basis, those pay programs need to be examined closely. Of course, the jobs need to be examined, and then the performance measures. And that's what the most common change is the swapping out of performance measures or reallocating the incentive amounts to different performance measures. Okay. So I'm really suggesting, notice these messaging that's taking place, sales innovation, sales advocacy. I shared that with you before, sales fulfillment. And you can see that the type of selling activities, the sales process is really different. So if we have a sales innovation, a group of customers, and these customers will say to you, If you think you already have the answer, you're the wrong vendor for us. And those are the customers that really want a partner to think through their problem. That would be sales innovation. Whereas we're buying the same stuff from you every year, we're placing our orders monthly. We expect a good price, and tell us what else is available, and we're on a national, regular reorder schedule. That would be fulfillment selling. So you can see these different types of selling behaviors occur with different types of customer populations. So take a look again as the jobs migrate. There are different types of jobs that are used. Now, why is this important? So if you're a sales compensation advisor to your company, obviously you need to know a lot about formulas, but you need to know a lot about jobs. So in total, there's probably over 55 to 60 different types of customer-facing jobs. And I'm including all of our digital friends, the digital marketing people and the freemiumware people and things like. So all of those jobs that follow along the buyer journey, the different touch points along the buyer journey, the Salesforce being one of those touch points, there's a variety of jobs there. And so what this chart is suggesting is that, when we're doing sales fulfillment, the classic titles we have is territory reps and account managers and customer service managers. Notice what happens when we get all the way over to sales innovation. We might have titles like architect consultants, pursuit teams, center of excellence resources. So it's not that any of those jobs maybe went away, but we keep adding jobs, obviously, as we go through, and we have to deliver these different types of messages. Okay, so sales compensation is just not a motivation topic. Sales compensation is a strategic alignment topic. And again, I'm not going to read all the different words here that I have. I have sales fulfillment, sales advocacy. Look over on the far right-hand side. We have some potential different mechanics. So I'm going to start at the bottom, sales fulfillment. Modest pay mix, I'm on the far lower right-hand corner. Modest pay mix, frequent payments, might even use something like an individual commission rate, pretty simple design, maybe a request for proposal award. These are just some examples. But notice as you go up to sales advocacy, we're going to have a much more aggressive pay mix. If the job, remember, it's job driven. If the job requires sales advocacy, we'll probably have a much more aggressive pay mix. We're going to have quota plans. We're going to have maybe customer sat incentives also, so that we don't upset the customers by our more than forceful selling behavior. And then take a look at our possible mechanics for sales innovation. Moderate pay mix, maybe strategic awards, for accomplishments, customer success incentives. You can see how the terms, the different types of mechanics that are available to us for the different types of jobs and their sales motions. Okay, so real simple. So tell me, that was great, Dave, but what? So typically what you're going to see in these different growth phases, typically, but not prescriptively, just kind of an observation, you're going to have simple pay programs in the startup. Maybe they're uncapped, no glue. We don't have to have a lot of hand holding and, employee events and stuff like that. Then in the volume growth phase, we're going to go to our role-based compensation programs. Each job gets its own incentive program, probably have a quota-based system to equalize earning opportunities. And then we'll probably have some very specific product-focused incentives. Reevaluation, that's when our profitability metrics appear. We're going to make sure that we don't have overpayment, blowout payments from mega orders or things like that. And this is the rise and fall of spiffs occur at this point. These are contests and special incentives because you're getting ready for your segmentation phase, which is optimization. So I'm going to have multiple plans. I'm going to have linked designs. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to make sure I can reward people. Okay. Now, what that brings me to is some illustrations. Now, there's a lot of different pay mechanics. What I'm doing is I picked out one illustration per phase of growth per job. And just to give you an illustration how the plans might migrate or change over a period of time. So let's take a look at this. So this would be the startup phase. So what type of pay program would you have in a startup phase? Okay. And again, your company may have decided, no, we're not going to do that. We have a completely different approach. Or startup, wow, our company started in 1850. I don't remember when the startup was. But you can take a look. These are some of the typical pay systems that might be available. Now, the way this chart is set up, I have it set up the same way for the 4 plans I'm going to show you. I have the job, acquire new business. That's it. Go out and sell something. But you have Germany, create business for us, okay? Territory, equal opportunity, same target incentive and quota. So everybody's got the same opportunity. The pay mix in this case is very aggressive, 50-50. I'm not a really big fan of going that deep, but let's just say, it's a North American plan and they're going to go 50-50 pay mix, 50% in base salary, 50% in target incentive. The measure's just one, revenue. It's got 100% weight, okay, of revenue. And it's got a ramped commission. So everybody has the same commission rate, and everything that you bring in, you're getting a percentage of it. Maybe it's on gross margin dollars. That would be an example of 10 and 20%. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, and let me make sure I point out something else, the 3X design. So what that really is saying is that, and that's the classic design for a sales compensation program for business-to-business selling, is what's called a 3X uncapped design. And you're probably familiar with it, but let me just repeat it. If I have a target pay of 100,000, whatever the currency might be, and it's split 70-30, 70 is in base, 30 is in target incentive, that is known as, we use the word pay mix to describe that. So the on-target earnings is 100,000. The base is 70,000, and there might be some variance based on the salary range. And then the target incentive amount is 30K. Well, a 3X design, which is, by the way, operates on a worldwide basis, no matter where you're on the planet, most B2B sellers follow this formula, sometimes not even consciously. And that is, if you take 3 times the at-risk component, which is 30, 90, and add it to the 70, the best performers should be earning about 160. Okay, well, okay, that one died real fast, David. What did you just say? Okay, so the leverage, which is a multiplier of the at-risk component, tells you how much the best performers should earn. Well, what's the definition of the best performers? The 90th percentile of your performers should be able to earn 3X the at-risk component. So here comes the math again. 100K split into 2 components, 70-30. 70 is the base, 30 is the target incentive amount. You can write this down. 30 times 3 is 90. Okay, that's 90,000. Add that to the 70,000. That means that the best performers should be able to earn about 160,000. So for those of you who build the formulas, you know what we've just done is we're creating a slope calculation so that we can actually calculate the payout so that we make sure the top performers are achieving the 3X incentive opportunity. So, so that would, and that's how this design is set up. So that if you take a look here, that there's the target pay is 100, the outstanding pay is 300,000. Okay, and you can see that along the column on the side there, 300,000. And we've set it up that we're expecting, the performance to be 1 million in sales and then 2 million in sales, and that's what the payout rate would be. So a very simple design. It's it's a commission program. Go get them. These are typical plan designs for what we call market makers, our first hires, people that we want to go out and have them create a business for us. But I'll tell you, you're grabbing a tiger by the tail. This is a very aggressive pay program. It's kind of hard to manage a workforce. And there's a tendency for this pay program to satiate the sellers. And once they get a big, huge amount of revenue taking place, they kind of sit back and sit on it. Okay, so there's some criticisms of this particular design. But the point being is, if you were starting your business and you wanted people to earn a lot of money and go out and grow your revenue really fast, you might use an aggressive 50-50, 60-40, 3X commission program on all revenue dollars. And again, there's no threshold here, because the rule about thresholds is that you don't pay for persuasion twice. And remember, sales compensation is a payment for persuasion. And let me just set aside a group of people real quickly, and that would be our friends in producers, those people who like real estate and stock and those types of folks. those are paid a commission, and their commission rate never changes. So I'm really talking about sales representative types of people that you have. Okay. All right. What about volume growth phase? Okay. Okay. Whoa, we got two measures, and this is an example of a link design. This is also a 3x uncapped. Each person has their own commission rate because we want them to have equal earning opportunities, but their territories are the different size. And the thing about this is the important thing is, what are the measures that you have? And I have two measures, okay? I not only want you to grow your total revenue from your existing customers, but I want you to get new customers too. So this is known as a link design. It says, hey, if you get more new customers, I'm going to increase your accelerator rate once you hit quota. But if you're not getting any new customers, guess what? You're staying on the old formula rate, and it's not going to change, okay? So now you can see what a link design does. It says you have to do number 2 to accelerate the earnings under number 1. That's known as a link design. Okay, well, what's the point? Why did you present this? Because I've added another measure. That measure is I got to get more new customers. So one of the problems with that first design is it tends to, after a while period of time, going after new customers becomes a little bit less interesting to the salespeople, and they kind of sit on their existing accounts for their revenue opportunity. And again, I'm not recommending these as designs. I'm not saying you should follow these, but I'm showing you how the mechanics shift basically as we go through these different phases. So now we're into the reevaluation phase. And you can see that what's happening. Oh my gosh, we're not growing, and we've got pricing pressures, and finance shows up and is wondering why we're spending so much money on our sales force. That's tough, you know, that's very unfair and tough. So what type of pay program might that be? Well, this is another example of a link design. This is known as a multiplier. And notice this is acquire, the role is account manager, acquire new and maintain existing business at the right price. And it's saying that I'm going to change the payout rate based upon how well you're managing pricing. Now, this assumes that the sales force has some pricing flexibility. So if somebody's doing a lot of discounting, they're going to sit on the low pricing line. If somebody's doing a really good job selling a lot, however, and they're sustaining their prices, they're going to earn much more. So what's the point? I've had to add a measure during this phase, profitability measure or price realization, which is another way of describing discounting. Okay, so again, phases of growth, changing the nature of the jobs, changing the performance measures, consequently changing the compensation program and how the payouts work. Okay, well, what about our fourth phase? Okay, well, this is a whole new era. So one of the things is a hallmark, and it's I cringe when I hear this expressed, but frequently at the end of the reevaluation phase, management has got this powerful revenue growth organization that seems to not be growing and seems to be discounting a lot, and all of a sudden the VP of sales or the director of sales is going to be leaving the company, and we wish he or she well, and a new person comes in and says, you know, we need to really focus around our customer segments, our buyer populations. We need to reorganize the sales organization to be grouped around those markets that have the best growth opportunity. We're going to be much more knowledgeable about what customers really need. And you go, well, isn't that a good way to sell, David? Yeah, I get it. You know, it sounds like something, but it's interesting how these different philosophies will emerge during different phases of growth. And as a result, you get these different themes, and you get these different configurations of jobs, and consequently, different compensation programs. So in this particular one, what we're looking for is we got to be selling multiple products. So this is an example where we actually have two components. So we took the incentive opportunity and split it into two pieces. One piece is worth 60%, and the other piece is worth 40%. So remember the 70-30. So I'm taking the 30 and breaking it into two pieces, and that would be 60% would be on total billings, and 40% would be on new products, okay? And these are actually, this is known as an unlinked design. So in other words, the two measures operate independent of each other. So your total billings is making payments for you, and that's the 3x uncapped design. Whereas we've done a 2x cap design, 2x cap design on these product payouts. And so if you only get two products, if you only get one product, you get 0 of the target incentive. If you get two products, you get 50% of the target incentive. If you had 3 product goals, you get 100% of the product incentive amount. And if you hit 4 and hit 5, you can see how it pays out. So in this particular case, what was happening in phase 4 of this company was, you know what, we need a better mix of product because we have these new configurations, and we just don't want you selling things. We want you to sell a full solution. We want you to sell recurring revenue. We want you to sell a prime vendor relationship. And so we have those things that we want you to accomplish. And you're saying, well, is this true of, David, is this true of every single job? No, it is not. Remember, each job has a charter based upon where they've been assigned, what types of customers they've been assigned to. And you might then say, well, you know, we're kind of divided up by countries, and each country has its own sales force. I get that, okay. But even within a country sales organization, which typically are set up in geographic manners, you have different types of customers. So you may not have the headcount that can you don't have enough budget for headcount. But if you have, for example, large customers and small customers being handled by one salesperson, you know that you're going to get not a balanced behavior. They're either going to be all focused on the big customers, or if the big customers are difficult, they're going to focus on the small customers, and you're not going to cover the market the way you want. So I'm not suggesting that you have unlimited budget and you can structure jobs any way you want. You do have to recognize that you have a limited amount of money available for the sales organization. And of course, as we'll learn tomorrow, you know, the digitization of selling is actually changing the whole economic picture about how companies are spending money on sales organizations. Okay, so I would encourage you, if you have a question, I haven't looked at the comments yet, but if you have a question about anything I've talked about, I'll sort of glance over to see if you want to answer a question. You might say, well, David, is it possible, blah, 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 or at our company, we've experienced this, or are you saying the following? So if you have a question that you would like to ask at this point, you know, I'll quickly glance over to see if we have some. Okay, so now this brings up, what about you? Okay, what's your job? And interestingly enough, the role of the sales compensation person, by the way, you might have it as a career, or you might be assigned to this as a project. Okay, so I understand that you may not be, you might be in total rewards, and sales comp is just one of the things that you work on, or you might be in finance and you've been assigned to this temporarily, or you're at a large company and you're the manager or director of sales compensation on a global basis. Okay, so in our startup phase, what is your role? Okay, frequently we'll have a technical designer. The practices are pretty uniform. A lot of times the sales department actually is managing the sales compensation program, but I have greater ambitions for you. In the phase 2, as you know, your professional role, we want you to help with designs. We want you to make sure that you're providing requests as the situation occurs. You know, we need to take a look at next year's plan. Can you work with a task force on this? That's your role, okay? Although we still have silo functions. We have the sales department, the total rewards group, and sometimes they talk to each other, sometimes they don't talk to each other. And then the reevaluation phase, you know, we are, here, thank you. So in the reevaluation phase, we'd like you to be a strategic advisor. We want you to adopt principles, and that's super important. I'm a big fan of having sales compensation principles. And why is that? Because sales compensation principles, you can design sales compensation programs on a global basis, no matter where the job is located, whether it's in South Korea or whether it's in UAE or whether it's in Canada. And once you have those uniform principles to design to, you can then just plug in the job. So what's the role of the job? What are the performance measures? And then you'll come out with a plan. And really what happens is, although the plans on the surface look different, and of course, the administration people say, why do you have so many plans? Well, if you actually look under the chassis, the mechanics, the underlying foundation, you'll see that they all share the same principles, okay, about thresholds, use of caps, mixes, and then leverage, and the types of performance measures. So once you have those rules in place at your company, you can design plans for any type of organization. And that's what we want you to be able to do, is put those principles together to allow your organization. And there are a lot of stakeholders that want to design their own plans on a worldwide basis. And certainly you're going to help them, but you'll say to them, let's make sure they're following our corporate design principles for sales compensation. And then finally, in the optimization phase, we want you to be an advisor to the business units. We want you to make sure you publish those corporate principles, okay? And you may even have a center of excellence with BU, a business unit partnership. So you're providing almost internal consulting services to your business units on a worldwide basis to the various organizations. And then finally, the last thing I wanted to share with you, I get it. We all have administration responsibilities. We also frequently find ourselves doing a lot of program management. But what I want for you, I want you to be a strategic advisor. And I will tell you, the concepts that I presented to you, if you present them to your leadership, they'll go, holy smokes, you mean we got to be changing this thing to reflect our own strategy? So, and the answer is yes. Okay. So thank you for joining us for the session. I do have one question here, and let me read through it. Rosita says, I'm going to read it. For sellers, thank you. For sellers that have responsibilities of selling to different size accounts, large and small, with an uncapped plan, how would risk be mitigated to avoid too high a payout from sales to only large accounts when the quota was set based on the assumption of mixed accounts? Okay, this is known as the mega order problem. And let me share with you, there's some very nice techniques. One is that we would suggest that when you're doing setting up that pay program, to avoid a large order blowing out the quota, okay, we have to make sure we have to balance the size of the accounts that they're selling to. So we can do a link design with that. That is that we expect this configuration of sales, but also we have to protect for the potential blowout payment. So we frequently will have a mega order clause that if the order is way huge than we expected, then only part of the revenue retires quota for compensation purposes. The remaining goes to a low payout schedule. So it kind of forces the point that you just can't rely upon the large customers to get all your revenue. And certainly we're going to protect the pay program and the quota system from unexpected mega orders. Okay. Well, that wraps up my session.